On the night of February 21st, 2006, a cash depot manager named Colin Dixon was driving along the A249 near Stockbury, Kent, when a car fitted with blue lights pulled him over. The men who stepped out were not police officers. They were the opening act of the largest cash robbery in British history. At the same moment, Dixon's wife, Lynn, and their young child were taken from their home in Herne Bay under a false pretext, told that Colin had been in a car accident. The family was reunited only to be held together at a remote farm, threatened at gunpoint. By the time the sun rose on February 22nd, almost $53 million in banknotes had vanished from the Securitas depot in Tonbridge. The gang had left behind roughly $154 million more, simply because it wouldn't fit in the truck. The man identified as the alleged mastermind was not a career criminal in the traditional sense. Lee Murray was a professional mixed martial arts fighter, a cage fighter who had competed at the highest levels of the sport, including the UFC. Murray held dual British and Moroccan citizenship, a detail that would later prove critical to his fate. He was known in London's fight scene as fearless and unpredictable, a man who thrived on risk. But Murray did not act alone. He assembled a crew that included Stuart Royal, Leah Rusha, Jetmir Buckpapa, Roger Coots, and Paul Allen. Each would play a distinct role in the operation. The gang also planted an insider. Amir Hysanaj secured a position at the Securitas depot itself. His job was reconnaissance. He smuggled a concealed camera inside the facility and documented the layout, the routines, and the vulnerabilities. A week before the robbery, Murray crashed his yellow Ferrari in South London. It was a moment of reckless arrogance, and it left behind forensic evidence that would later help investigators connect him to the crime. To complete their preparations, the gang commissioned prosthetic latex disguises from a woman named Michelle Hogg. The masks were designed to make them unrecognizable during the operation. Every detail was planned, or so they believed. The technique the gang employed is known in law enforcement as a tiger kidnapping, seizing the family of an employee to coerce that employee into providing access to a high-security facility. It is one of the most psychologically devastating forms of robbery. With the Dixon family under their control and Colin compelled to cooperate, the gang arrived at the Securitas cash depot at Medway House, Vale Road, Tonbridge, at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning on February 22nd. 7 masked and armed gang members entered the depot. Inside, 14 staff members were working the night shift. All 14 were subdued and restrained at gunpoint. The terror was absolute. CCTV footage from inside the depot later captured a figure holding a stopwatch, believed to be Murray himself, timing the operation. The gang moved with rehearsed precision, loading banknotes into a white Renault lorry at the loading bay. The cash they took was the property of the Bank of England, almost $53 million in used and unused sterling banknotes. Initial news reports on the morning of February 22nd estimated the theft at around $25 million. The true figure would stun investigators when it was finally confirmed. This figure shattered the previous UK cash theft record, the 2004 Northern Bank robbery in Belfast, which had netted $26.5 million. Tonbridge had doubled it in a single night. Before leaving, the gang locked the staff and the Dixon family, including their young child, inside the cash cages. They were left bound, terrified, and uncertain whether anyone would find them. After the gang left, the trapped staff were able to raise the alarm. By approximately 03:15, police had been called, and one of the most intensive manhunts in British criminal history began. Kent police launched Operation Deliver, a massive undertaking that would eventually involve approximately 300 officers and cost around $6 million. From the outset, detectives understood that the operation's precision pointed to extensive planning and an inside source. Getaway vehicles were located within days. One vehicle still contained $1.3 million in cash. Raids across the region yielded even larger fines. $9 million recovered in Welling, southeast London, and another $8 million in Southborough, Kent. One of the earliest leads came when a 41-year-old woman was arrested at a building society branch in Bromley on suspicion of handling stolen goods. She was later reported to be innocent, but the arrest showed how quickly investigators were chasing the stolen cash. Forensic analysis of the crime scene proved devastating for the gang. DNA recovered from cable ties used to restrain the staff was linked directly to Roger Kautz, placing him inside the depot during the robbery. The depot's own CCTV provided critical footage. Investigators reviewed hours of internal camera recordings and identified the figure with the stopwatch. Murray's Ferrari, crashed the week before, had already placed his DNA and forensic profile within police databases. Michelle Hogg, the woman who had created the prosthetic disguises, was identified and confronted by police. Facing serious charges, she agreed to cooperate as a Crown witness. Her testimony would become a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Securitas and their insurers offered a $2 million reward for information, the largest such reward ever posted in the United Kingdom at that time. Securitas had already reimbursed the Bank of England $25 million on the day following the robbery, and would ultimately cover the full loss. Multiple arrests followed swiftly in late February and March 2006. Stuart Royal, Leah Rusha, Jetmir Bakpapa, Roger Kautz, and Amir Heisenaj were all taken into custody by Kent police. The net was tightening, but the alleged mastermind was already gone. 4 days after the robbery, Lee Murray and Paul Allen had left the UK by ferry from Dover. They drove through Europe and crossed into Morocco, where Murray held citizenship. It was a calculated escape route. Moroccan law does not extradite its own citizens. Moroccan authorities arrested both Murray and Allen in June 2006, several months after their arrival. Allen would eventually be extradited back to the UK. Murray, protected by his citizenship, would face justice on Moroccan soil, but not for years. Back in England, 2 other defendants were also charged in connection with the robbery. Both would maintain their innocence throughout the proceedings. The evidence was stacking up. DNA, CCTV, Heisenaj's insider reconnaissance, Hogg's testimony about the disguises, and the sheer volume of recovered cash linking specific locations to specific suspects. Investigators had recovered roughly $18 million in those early raids, but the majority of the stolen money, tens of millions of pounds, had already disappeared into networks that stretched far beyond Kent. The race to trace it was only beginning. The main trial opened at the Old Bailey, England's most famous criminal court. Royal, Rusha, Bakpapa, Kautz, Heisenaj, Fowler, and Borer all stood before the jury. The charges included conspiracy to kidnap, conspiracy to rob, and conspiracy to possess firearms. Michelle Hogg, whose charges had been dropped in exchange for her cooperation, testified for the prosecution under witness protection. She detailed how she had created the prosthetic disguises and identified members of the gang. In January 2008, the jury delivered its verdicts. Royal, Rusha, Bakpapa, Kautz, and Heisenaj were all found guilty. The first 4 received indeterminate sentences for public protection with minimum tariffs of 15 years. Heisenaj received a determinate sentence of 20 years. 2 other defendants were acquitted, the jury finding insufficient evidence to convict them. The verdicts underscored the precision required in a case of this complexity. Paul Allen, extradited from Morocco, pleaded guilty in September 2009 and was sentenced to 18 years. His case was resolved without a trial, a tacit acknowledgement of the weight of evidence against him. Lee Murray, untouchable by British extradition, was tried in Morocco in 2010. He was convicted and initially sentenced to 10 years, a figure that drew outrage in Britain. On appeal, Moroccan courts increased the sentence to 25 years. The Securitas Depot robbery changed British security practices overnight. Cash handling procedures, depot access protocols, and the vetting of employees were all overhauled across the industry. The vulnerability that Heisenaj exploited, an insider with a camera, could never be allowed again. For Colin Dixon, his wife Lynn, their young child, and the 14 staff members who endured that night, the psychological toll was immense. They were the forgotten victims of a crime the media often treated as a caper. Their ordeal was no film. The consequences continued to ripple outward. After his release, Paul Allen was the victim of a shooting at his home in northeast London in 2019, which left him paralyzed. 3 men were convicted of conspiracy to murder in connection with that attack in 2025. Michelle Hogg was given a new identity under witness protection, her old life erased. Some suspects reportedly fled the UK and are believed to be living abroad, though this remains unconfirmed. The full network that laundered the missing money has never been publicly identified. By 2016, approximately $21 million had been recovered. As of February 2026, around $32 million remains unaccounted for, and the investigation remains technically open. Someone, somewhere, still knows where that money is. They stole almost $53 million and left behind $154 million they couldn't carry. In the end, the very scale of their ambition was both their achievement and their undoing. A new case drops every day. Subscribe so you never miss one.